"Are you sure you want us to open her bag, Mr. Moretti?" The question hung in the wine cellar like smoke. A black server apron lay folded on the long oak table beside a silver tray still smeared with fingerprints from dinner service. A blue binder with frayed corners peeked from Harper Bennett's canvas tote. Near her wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve, an old hospital bracelet flashed white under the chandelier light. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Vanessa Russo smiled and said, almost kindly, "If Harper has nothing to hide, this will all be over in a minute." 3 hours earlier, Harper had been balancing 3 glasses of Barolo through the private dining room of Moretti House, moving the way she always moved, carefully, quietly, trying not to take up more space than necessary. At 32, plus size, exhausted, and permanently aware of every stare, she had learned how to become invisible in expensive rooms. Wealthy guests noticed the wine. They noticed the crystal. They noticed Damian Moretti when he entered. They never noticed the waitress carrying everything. Usually, Harper preferred it that way. The less attention she drew, the safer she felt. Her father had taught her that long before prison took him away. Long before a prison chaplain handed her a folded death certificate and explained that a man accused of stealing union money had died alone in a concrete cell. Since then, Harper kept records. Every receipt, every pay stub, every tip sheet, every document that proved a number had once existed before someone changed it. She never spoke about it. People called it paranoia. Harper called it survival. The dinner rush ended just after 9. While other servers rolled silverware, Harper stood beside the accounting desk waiting for signatures. That was when she noticed something strange. A tip report sat partially exposed beneath a stack of folders. Only a corner was visible, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Her own. Earlier that afternoon, she had written $1,260 on the carbon copy sheet from Table 12's VIP reservation. Now the visible total read $780. Harper froze. For a second she thought she was mistaken. Then she saw the ink. The number had been rewritten. Not corrected. Rewritten. Her stomach tightened. She slipped her phone from her apron pocket and snapped a photo before anyone noticed. Across the room, Vanessa Russo was laughing with 2 managers. Elegant, polished, untouchable. The kind of woman who could ruin a career without ever raising her voice. Harper said nothing. She simply added the photo to the growing folder on her old phone. One more inconsistency. One more number that didn't match. One more reason not to throw away the records everyone told her were useless. 40 minutes later, the emergency meeting was called. Missing tip money. Locked doors. Accusations. Harper had known the moment Vanessa entered the wine cellar that someone was about to become the sacrifice. She just hadn't expected it to be her. Now she stood beneath a 100-year-old chandelier while 20 employees watched. Vanessa's expression remained warm, sympathetic even. "Nobody is accusing you of anything yet," she said softly. "We're simply following procedure." Harper looked at the woman, then at Damian Moretti seated at the end of the table. The Mafia boss had barely spoken all night. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting against a crystal glass, his dark eyes moving between faces instead of words. Harper noticed something then. Not suspicion, not belief. A pause, the smallest pause, because while everyone else was staring at her bag, Damian Moretti was staring at the timestamp on the photo glowing on her cracked phone screen. And according to that timestamp, the report had been altered nearly an hour before the missing money officially existed. The timestamp sat on Harper's cracked phone screen like a splinter under skin. Nobody else seemed to care. Vanessa certainly didn't. She folded her hands neatly on the polished oak table and offered Damian Moretti the same calm smile she'd probably worn in boardrooms, charity galas, and contract negotiations worth millions. "The photo proves nothing," she said gently. "Employees take pictures of paperwork all the time. Sometimes people become confused about what they've seen." A few people nodded. Harper felt it happen. The room shifting, not toward truth, toward comfort, toward the easier story. The overweight waitress, the missing money, the explanation everyone could live with. She tightened her grip on her phone. The number was different. Her voice stayed steady. I wrote that report myself. Vanessa turned toward her with almost maternal patience. And I'm sure you believe that. The words landed softly. That made them worse. Silence settled over the cellar again. Heavy. Expensive. Dangerous. Somewhere beyond the thick stone walls, a dishwasher rumbled through another cycle. Glasses clinked. The restaurant continued breathing while 20 people stood trapped inside a room that suddenly felt much smaller. Damien said nothing. He simply extended one hand. Harper hesitated before placing the phone in it. His eyes moved across the image, then to the timestamp, then back to the image again. He returned the phone without comment. That should have made her feel dismissed. Instead, it made her nervous. Men like Damien Moretti didn't waste attention. They stored it. Vanessa cleared her throat. There's another issue. She slid a folder across the table. Harper recognized her own name on the tab. Her stomach dropped. Before joining Moretti Hospitality, Harper was suspended from a previous employer after cash discrepancies were discovered. A murmur moved through the room. Harper closed her eyes for half a second. There it was. The thing she'd spent years outrunning. Tell them the rest, she said quietly. Vanessa's smile never moved. The record speaks for itself. Tell them the rest. This time Harper's voice cut sharper. The room stilled. Vanessa finally sighed. The missing funds were later recovered. From the manager's office. Harper looked around the table. Not from me. Nobody answered. A line cook shifted uncomfortably. A bartender stared at the floor. The damage was already done. Accusations had longer lives than corrections. Damien watched the exchange without interruption. Then he asked a question so mild it almost disappeared. Who prepared tonight's tip report? Vanessa blinked once. Accounting. Which person? The silence that followed lasted less than 2 seconds. Still felt too long. Michael Green. Damien nodded. Nothing more. No accusation. No reaction. Just a name filed away somewhere behind those dark eyes. The meeting should have continued. Instead, Harper noticed something odd. On the corner of the report packet lay a coffee receipt partly hidden beneath the folder stack. She wouldn't have looked twice except she recognized the logo. The cafe across the street closed at 7. The receipt showed 2 large coffees purchased at 9:14 p.m. Her gaze narrowed. The tip report had supposedly been finalized before 8:30. She reached for the paper. Vanessa's hand landed on it first. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just fast enough. That's unrelated. Harper looked up. Then why hide it? A muscle flickered near Vanessa's jaw. Gone almost instantly. Across the room, Damien saw it too. Harper knew because his eyes moved there at the exact same moment hers did. Nobody spoke. Somewhere overhead, footsteps crossed the dining room floor. A server opened the cellar door, then quickly shut it after seeing the faces inside. Harper lowered her gaze back to the paperwork. That was when she saw a second detail. Tiny, almost invisible. Printed beneath the report authorization line was a security access number. And according to the number, the file had been generated from a terminal located in an office that had been officially locked for renovations 3 weeks earlier. The number sat at the bottom of the page like a fingerprint left at a crime scene. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The cellar seemed to tighten around it. Old stone walls. Amber light. Expensive silence. Harper kept her eyes on the authorization code, printed beneath the report, while Vanessa carefully slid the paperwork back into her folder. That office was decommissioned, Harper said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Vanessa smiled. Storage rooms get relabeled all the time. It isn't a storage room. Harper looked up. It's Office 3B. A faint crease appeared between Vanessa's brows. Gone almost instantly. Most people would have missed it. Damien Moretti did not. He leaned back slightly in his chair, one finger resting against the stem of his wine glass. Still silent. Still watching. Harper felt every eye in the room turning toward her. She hated attention. Always had. Attention was how people measured you, judged you. decided what kind of person you must be before hearing a single word. But numbers were easier than people. Numbers stayed where you left them unless someone moved them. I know that office code because I worked an event there last year, she continued. The reservation coordinator used it to print guest lists. Vanessa gave a small laugh. Not mocking. Worse. Polite. Harper, you've had a very emotional evening. The words landed softly enough to sound compassionate. The implication landed harder. Emotional. Confused. Overwhelmed. The room shifted again. Harper could feel it happening. A few people lowered their eyes. One manager nodded slightly. It was easier to believe a stressed waitress was making connections that weren't there. Easier than believing something larger might be wrong. Harper swallowed, then reached into her tote bag. Vanessa's gaze sharpened. So did Damien's. Harper pulled out the battered blue binder. The corners were worn white. Hundreds of pages bulged from inside. Years of records. Years of refusing to throw things away. She flipped through the pages with practiced fingers until she found what she wanted. A folded reservation packet. A wine order slip. A staffing chart. September 18th, she said. Last year. She placed the documents on the table. Office 3B. The same authorization code sat in the corner. The same sequence of numbers. The same terminal location. Nobody spoke. Harper turned another page. Then another. 5 separate event packets. Same office. Same code. Vanessa's smile remained in place, but it no longer reached her eyes. You've certainly kept a lot of paperwork. I keep everything. The answer came before Harper could stop it. The room fell quiet again. She hated how defensive it sounded. Hated how true it was. Across the table, Damien's gaze dropped briefly to the hospital bracelet still visible beneath her sleeve. Something unreadable moved across his face. Not sympathy. Recognition, maybe. The recognition of someone carrying old wounds in strange ways. Show me the report again, he said. His voice was calm. Low. The first words he'd spoken in nearly 10 minutes. Vanessa hesitated. Barely. Then handed him the packet. Damien studied the bottom corner. Once. Twice. Nobody interrupted him. Finally he asked, who has access to Office 3B? Nobody, Vanessa replied immediately. Too immediately. Damien looked up. The silence that followed felt colder than anger. Harper noticed something then. A tiny detail almost hidden beneath Vanessa's folder. The edge of a printed reservation note. Most people wouldn't have recognized it. Harper did. She'd typed hundreds of them. The date at the top was tomorrow's date. The room assignment listed Office 3B. And according to the reservation system, Office 3B was still officially closed. The reservation note disappeared beneath Vanessa's folder almost as quickly as Harper noticed it. Almost. Office 3B is closed, Harper said. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The pressure in the cellar increased anyway. Vanessa folded the folder neatly and offered a patient smile. Harper, I think we've reached the point where you're looking for patterns because you're frightened. A few heads nodded. The words sounded reasonable. Compassionate, even. That was what made them dangerous. Harper felt 20 pairs of eyes shift toward her again. The overweight waitress. The employee under investigation. The woman holding onto old paperwork like life rafts. She knew how this looked. Rich people never had to say someone was beneath them. They built rooms that said it for them. The wine cellar smelled of oak barrels, expensive cork, and old money. Men in tailored jackets stood beside women wearing watches worth more than Harper's apartment lease. Even now, with questions piling up, she was still the smallest person in the room. Vanessa turned toward Damien. With respect, we have missing money, nervous employees, and a service staff waiting to go home. We can't chase every misunderstanding. Damien didn't answer. His gaze rested on the reservation note for a fraction of a second before moving away. That silence somehow felt heavier than agreement. A man near the far end of the table cleared his throat. Richard Sloan. Corporate counsel. Gray suit. Silver cufflinks. The kind of attorney who billed by the minute and never wasted words. "Perhaps we should simplify this," he said. "Miss Bennett, if you'd sign a preliminary statement confirming you may have misread the report, we can continue our internal review without damaging anyone's reputation." The paper slid across the table toward her. Harper looked down. Her name was already typed at the bottom. Only the signature line remained blank. The room seemed to exhale. There it was. The exit everyone wanted. Sign. Apologize. Become the mistake. Let the machine keep running. Harper stared at the paper, then slowly adjusted the small brass name tag pinned to her apron. Harper Bennett. The letters caught the chandelier light. Her fingers trembled once before becoming still. "I won't sign something I know isn't true." The silence afterward landed hard. Richard's expression barely changed. "No one is accusing you of dishonesty. The statement says I was mistaken." Harper looked up. "I wasn't." Across the room, someone sighed. Another person checked their watch. Irritation was replacing suspicion now. She could feel it. The wealthy hated delays almost as much as they hated uncertainty. Vanessa stepped closer. Not enough to seem threatening, just enough to reclaim control. "Harper, sometimes stress affects memory. You've had a difficult evening. A difficult life, from what we've heard." The words cut deeper than an insult. They reached for pity, for weakness, for the idea that pain made her unreliable. Harper opened her mouth, then stopped, because another detail had just clicked into place. Small, ridiculously small, the kind of thing most people would miss. She looked at the reservation note again, then at Vanessa, then at Richard Sloane. "Can I see that page one more time?" Vanessa hesitated. "Why?" "Because the event listed here starts at 7 o'clock tomorrow." Richard gave a faint smile. "And?" Harper swallowed. "And the reservation system automatically generates those notes 6 hours before an event begins. That's how the software works." Nobody moved. Even the dishwasher rumble beyond the wall seemed distant now. Harper looked directly at Damien. "Which means that note shouldn't exist yet." For the first time all evening, Vanessa didn't answer immediately, and Damien Moretti noticed something Harper had already seen. Vanessa's phone screen had lit up beside her folder for less than a second, just long enough to reveal a text message preview. "Office 3B access updated." The text message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Vanessa turned her phone face down on the table with controlled precision. Not hurried, not guilty, just a fraction too deliberate. The cellar fell quiet again. Harper could almost hear the hum of the refrigeration units behind the stone walls, the soft tick of someone's expensive watch, the distant murmur of a restaurant still serving desserts 2 floors above them. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Richard Sloane adjusted his cufflinks and cleared his throat. A software timing discrepancy and an automated text notification are hardly evidence of misconduct. The spell began to break. Heads nodded. Relief moved through the room. People wanted the problem smaller, easier. Harper knew that feeling. Most people would rather explain away a crack in the wall than ask what was moving behind it. Vanessa recovered immediately. "Exactly." Her voice was warm again. "Professional. We have employees making assumptions and reading meanings into ordinary administrative processes." She looked toward Harper with a sympathetic expression that somehow felt worse than contempt. "You have a good memory, Harper. Nobody doubts that. But memory and proof aren't the same thing." Harper lowered her eyes to the blue binder in her hands. The edges pressed against her palms. The cardboard corners had softened from years of being carried through subway stations, tiny apartments, break rooms, and double shifts. Most people saw a stack of papers. Harper saw every moment someone had told her she was mistaken when she knew she wasn't. Slowly, she opened it. "You're right," she said. "They're not the same thing." Then she removed a clear plastic sleeve. The room watched. Inside was a folded document and an old phone. Not her cracked smartphone. An older one. Thick, scratched. The charging port held together with clear tape. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but her fingers stopped moving. Harper noticed. Damien noticed too. "What's that?" Richard asked. Harper placed the phone on the table. "Michael Green's." Silence. The name landed differently this time. Michael Green, the accountant who supposedly prepared the report. The accountant who had resigned 8 months ago. Vanessa spoke first. "Michael left voluntarily."
No.
Harper's answer came immediately. "He disappeared." A few people exchanged looks. Harper swallowed. "He used to eat lunch in the back hallway every Tuesday. Same tuna sandwich. Same black coffee. Then one day he stopped showing up." Richard frowned. "People change jobs. People do." Harper slid the folded paper across the table. It wasn't a resignation letter. It was an unpaid invoice from a storage facility in Queens. Michael Green's name, 3 months overdue. He never emptied his unit. The room grew still again. Damien picked up the paper. His eyes moved across it slowly. Harper continued. "Last week I went there." Vanessa laughed softly. "You broke into someone's storage unit?"
No.
Harper met her eyes. "I paid the overdue balance." That finally created a reaction. Small. Almost invisible. Vanessa looked away first. Inside the storage unit had been boxes of payroll records, old event files, and one phone. Michael's phone. Most of it had been wiped. Almost all of it. Harper picked up the device and pressed a button. The screen flickered weakly to life. A single voicemail remained. Corrupted. Incomplete. 32 seconds long. The audio crackled through the cellar speakers. Static. Breathing. Then Michael's voice. Tired. Nervous. "If anything happens, check the duplicate records." More static. "They're using Office." The recording cut out. Dead silence followed. Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for a glass. The message proved almost nothing. And yet somehow it changed everything. Because Damien Moretti wasn't looking at the phone anymore. He was looking at Vanessa. Specifically at the tiny gold cross necklace resting against her collarbone. A necklace he'd seen her wear every day for 11 years. The necklace trembling for the first time since the meeting began. The necklace stopped trembling a second before Vanessa noticed Damien watching it. Then she steadied her hands and folded them neatly over the folder. To anyone else, the moment would have disappeared. To Damien Moretti, it joined a growing collection of things that did not belong together. The voicemail, Office 3B, the reservation note, the coffee receipt, the altered report, tiny fractures, none large enough to collapse a building. Yet, "We're done for tonight," Richard Sloane said finally. Relief moved through the room like a draft. Chairs shifted. Glasses clinked softly. People wanted to leave before uncertainty attached itself to them. Damien rose from his seat.
No.
One word. Quiet. Nobody moved after that. Vanessa's smile remained intact. Damien, with respect, "We still don't have proof of theft." "I didn't say theft." The room fell silent again. He picked up Michael Green's old phone and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he looked at Richard. "Tomorrow morning. I want payroll archives. 5 years." Richard blinked. 5 years. 5. No explanation followed. None was needed. Outside, rain had begun tapping against the narrow cellar windows near the ceiling. A soft, steady rhythm. Harper listened to it while everyone else tried to understand what had just changed. The dangerous thing wasn't that Damien seemed angry. He didn't. The dangerous thing was that he seemed interested. An hour later, the restaurant was nearly empty. The last guests had gone home. Dishwashers hummed in the kitchen. Neon signs reflected on rain-slick pavement outside. Harper sat alone at a stainless steel prep table, her binder open beside a paper cup of cold coffee. She should have gone home. Instead, she was organizing copies of old tip sheets by date. Across from her sat a stack of unpaid hospital invoices belonging to her mother. She had never shown them to anyone. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She wasn't even looking for money. She only wanted one thing. The same thing she'd wanted since the day her father died behind bars while everyone called him a thief. The truth. Written down where nobody could erase it. Footsteps approached. Harper looked up. Damien stood in the doorway.
No bodyguards. No entourage.
Just a man in a dark coat holding a thin file folder. He glanced at the hospital bills, then at her binder, then back at her. Why keep fighting this? He asked. Harper stared at the invoices for a moment. Because lies don't stop when people stay quiet. The answer lingered between them. Damien nodded once. Nothing more. Then he placed the folder on the table. Personnel records. Michael Green. Harper frowned. You found his file? Part of it. Damien opened the folder. Several pages were missing. Entire sections had been removed. Performance reviews. Exit documentation. Internal complaints. Gone. Not lost. Removed. Someone had been careful. Very careful. Harper felt cold despite the warm kitchen air. Damien turned another page. His resignation was submitted at 11:43 p.m. Harper's eyes narrowed. That's impossible. Why? Because every payroll administrator left by 6. The security policy locked them out after hours. Damien watched her closely. Not because he doubted her. Because he was measuring the certainty behind the statement. Harper reached into the binder and immediately found a staffing manual from 3 years earlier. The policy was there in black ink. Payroll access terminated at 6 p.m. daily. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Rain tapped softly against the window. Somewhere in the distance, a spoon struck the side of a glass. Then Damien's phone vibrated. One message. He looked at the screen. His expression didn't change. That was how Harper knew the message mattered. Slowly, he turned the phone toward her. Security access records. Office 3B. Hundreds of entries over the last 18 months. The same employee authorization number appeared again and again. Not Vanessa's. Not Michael Green's. Someone higher. Someone with unrestricted executive clearance. Damien stared at the number for a long moment. Then he exhaled once. Very quietly. Because he recognized it immediately. It belonged to a man he had trusted for nearly 11 years. The executive access number glowed on Damien's phone screen for several seconds before it went dark. Nobody else was there to see it. Just him and Harper in the nearly empty kitchen. Rain still tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere deeper in the building, a refrigeration unit hummed. The ordinary sounds felt strangely distant. Damien slipped the phone into his pocket. Go home, he said. Harper blinked. That's it. His eyes settled on her binder. Then on the stack of hospital invoices. For tonight. The answer should have felt dismissive. Instead it sounded like a door quietly closing before a storm arrived. The next afternoon, the executive boardroom on the top floor overlooked half of Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Dark walnut table. Leather chairs that cost more than some cars. Nobody knew they were walking into a test. Not even the people running it. Harper sat near the far wall with a tray of coffee service balanced carefully in both hands. She wasn't supposed to be there. Officially, she was delivering refreshments. Unofficially, Damien had asked her one question that morning. What else do you remember? Not evidence. Not theories. Memory. Harper had thought about it all night. About receipts. Reports. Names. Faces. Then one detail surfaced. Tiny. Ridiculous. The kind of thing people laughed at when mentioned aloud. Yet she couldn't shake it. The board members filed in. Vanessa arrived. Richard Sloan arrived. Then came Anthony DeLuca, Chief Financial Officer. 11 years with the company. Trusted. Respected. The executive access number belonged to him. Anthony smiled at everyone. Shook hands. Complimented a board member's tie. He looked exactly like the kind of man people trusted with numbers. Harper watched him place a leather portfolio on the table. Then she noticed it again. The smell. Expensive cedar cologne mixed with a sharper scent beneath it. Burnt espresso. Her grip tightened slightly around the tray. Damien entered last. Silence followed him into the room. Not fear. Gravity. He took his seat at the head of the table and opened a thin folder. Before we begin, he said calmly, I have a question. Anthony smiled. Of course. Damien slid a printed document across the table. A duplicate. Payroll record. One of Michael Green's files. Have you ever seen this? Anthony barely glanced down.
No.
Too fast. Harper felt something shift inside her chest. Not certainty. Recognition. Damien simply nodded. Interesting. Then nothing. The meeting moved on. Quarterly projections.
Staffing discussion.
Restaurant expansions. 40 minutes passed. Nobody mentioned payroll again. The trap wasn't in the question. It was in the waiting. Harper understood that now. Damien wasn't hunting mistakes. He was hunting comfort. People lied best when they thought they had survived. At the end of the meeting, Anthony reached for his portfolio. A folded receipt slipped from between the pages and drifted onto the table. Nobody would have noticed except Harper. She saw the logo immediately. The same coffee shop from the missing receipt. Same location. Same night. Same time window. Anthony grabbed it quickly. Too quickly. Damien saw that too. But he said nothing. The room began to empty. Chairs scraped softly across hardwood floors. Conversations resumed. People relaxed. Then Harper spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. Mr. DeLuca? Anthony paused near the door. Yes. Harper set the tray down. What kind of coffee do you drink? Confusion flickered across his face. Excuse me? Coffee. She offered an apologetic smile. I was just curious. A few people chuckled. Anthony relaxed. Black.
No sugar.
Never. Harper nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Anthony left. The door closed behind him. Silence settled over the boardroom again. Vanessa stared at Harper. Richard frowned. Neither understood. Damien did. Because the receipt Anthony had tried to hide showed 2 large caramel lattes purchased at 9:14 p.m. on the exact night, he claimed he had never been anywhere near Office 3B. And for the first time since this began, Vanessa stopped looking at Harper like a nuisance and started looking at her like a problem. Vanessa did not sleep that night. Harper knew because at 6:12 the next morning, her old phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. No words, just a photograph. A cardboard archive box sitting outside a dumpster behind one of the company's storage facilities. Rainwater soaked the sides. The shipping label was still visible. Office 3B. Harper stared at the image for 3 full seconds before grabbing her coat. By noon, everyone was back in the wine cellar where this had begun. The same stone walls. The same oak table. The same chandelier hanging overhead like a witness that never blinked. The difference was that nobody looked comfortable anymore. Not Vanessa. Not Richard Sloane. Not Anthony DeLuca. And certainly not Damien Moretti. The archive box sat in the center of the table. Water-stained. Half collapsed. Someone had tried to destroy it overnight. They had simply run out of time. Silence filled the room as Damien opened the lid. Inside were original payroll records. Not copies. Not scanned files. Originals. Paper leaves crackled softly beneath his hands. Harper recognized them immediately. The carbon copy tip logs she had spent years protecting matched the numbers inside the box exactly. Every altered report. Every rewritten total. Every missing dollar. Page after page. Year after year. Nobody spoke. Damien turned another sheet. Then another. The numbers grew larger. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. The room seemed to shrink around the documents. Anthony shifted in his chair. Vanessa stared at the table. Richard no longer looked confident. Harper kept her hands folded in her lap. She had imagined this moment so many times. Yet now that it was happening, she felt strangely calm. Because the records weren't the most important thing in the box. There's something underneath. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Damien looked at her, then reached deeper into the archive carton. His hand emerged holding a small external hard drive sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Anthony went pale, truly pale, not nervous, not uncomfortable, pale. Damien noticed, so did everyone else. The drive connected to the conference monitor. A progress bar crawled across the screen. Nobody moved while it loaded. The blinking light on the device seemed impossibly loud. Then folders appeared. Payroll, executive authorizations, security archives, audio backups. Damien opened the final folder. Hundreds of recordings. Automatically. Archived calls from the Office 3B terminal. One file had been flagged with a red marker. Michael Green. The room froze. Damien clicked play. Static crackled through the speakers. Then Michael's voice filled the cellar. Tired. Frightened. Very real. I've documented everything. If you're hearing this, it means they found the duplicate ledgers. A second voice answered. Anthony DeLuca's voice. Clear enough that nobody could pretend otherwise. Delete the copies. Michael sounded exhausted. You're taking employee tips. It's accounting. It's theft. Silence. Then Anthony again. Colder this time. Nobody listens to accountants. The recording continued. Transfers.
Bonus realocations.
Altered payrolls. Instructions. Dates. Names. It wasn't one missing envelope. It wasn't one dishonest manager. It was a system. A machine operating beneath Damien's name for years. Nobody in the room breathed normally anymore. Damien stared at the screen without moving. Harper watched something change behind his eyes. Not anger. Pain. Real pain. Because he remembered signing charity checks for struggling employees while the money already belonged to them. He remembered trusting Anthony with expansion budgets. He remembered Michael Green's resignation and how he had never asked why a man with perfect reviews disappeared overnight. Most of all, he remembered Harper standing in this same room while people searched her bag. He had watched. He had said nothing. The recording ended. The silence afterward felt almost sacred. Harper reached into her binder and removed the coffee receipt. The original one. Protected inside plastic. She set it beside the payroll records. Then she said the sentence nobody else could say. The money never vanished. The people did. Nobody argued. Nobody could. Damien lowered his eyes to the evidence spread across the table. The receipt. The tip logs. Michael's recording. The hard drive. 11 years of trust reduced to paper and sound. Slowly, very carefully, he removed his glasses and placed them beside the evidence. Then he looked toward Richard Sloane. His voice was calm enough to terrify everyone in the room. Call my attorney. For a long time after, Damien said the words, nobody moved. Call my attorney. They hung over the wine cellar like the final note of a bell. Not loud. Not dramatic.
Permanent.
3 months later, the investigations were no longer rumors. Anthony DeLuca had been removed from every executive position he held. Federal auditors had opened formal inquiries. Civil lawsuits followed. The board voted unanimously to terminate the entire compensation structure that had allowed the scheme to survive. Vanessa Russo resigned before she could be dismissed. Richard Sloane quietly left the company within weeks. Their names disappeared from office doors. Their authority vanished. But that was never the part Harper cared about most. One rainy Thursday afternoon, nearly every employee from the restaurant group gathered inside the renovated training hall overlooking the Hudson. Servers, dishwashers, bartenders, hosts, prep cooks, people whose names rarely appeared in reports. Damien stood at the front beside a projection screen.
No bodyguards. No speechwriters.
Just a stack of folders. Each folder contained reimbursement records. Years of unpaid tips returned to the people who had earned them. Some employees cried. Others simply sat in stunned silence. One elderly dishwasher stared at his check for almost a full minute before removing his glasses to wipe his eyes. Harper watched from the back row. She had almost skipped the event entirely. Old habits were difficult to kill. The habit of staying invisible was one of the hardest. Damien stepped to the microphone. Before we continue, he said quietly, there is something that needs to be corrected. The room fell silent. He picked up a file. Harper recognized it immediately. Her personnel record. The same record that had followed her through years of whispered assumptions and suspicious glances. Damien opened it. Then, in front of everyone, He removed the disciplinary memorandum connected to the theft accusation. The paper was fed through a shredder beside the stage. Nobody applauded. Nobody spoke. The moment was too personal for that. Damien looked directly at her. Harper Bennett was never under investigation for theft. His voice remained calm. The official record now reflects that she identified and documented financial misconduct that this company failed to see. Failed to see. The words landed harder than any apology. Because they were true. Later that afternoon, a legal representative from the company met privately with Harper and her mother. Every outstanding hospital invoice had been resolved through the Employee Protection Fund Damien created after the investigation. Not as charity. Not as a favor. As restitution. Insurance coverage was restored. Patient advocate had been assigned. A lawyer was already reviewing records connected to Harper's father's conviction. For the first time in years, her mother smiled without worrying about the next bill arriving in the mailbox. Yet the moment Harper carried home with her happened weeks later. On an ordinary Tuesday evening.
No cameras. No executives. No speeches.
The restaurant was quiet after closing. The last dishwasher cycle hummed softly in the background. Rain tapped against the windows. Harper stood alone in the small employee office holding the old blue binder. The binder that had once made people look at her like a suspect. The binder she used to carry pressed tightly against her chest like armor. A new glass display case stood near the wall. Inside were copies of the original tip logs and a small plaque. Not with Damien's name. Not with the company's logo. Just a simple inscription. Because one employee kept the records. Harper smiled despite herself. Then she placed the binder inside the case. For the first time in years, she no longer needed to carry it everywhere. The truth could stand on its own now. When she turned to leave, Damien was standing quietly in the doorway. Neither spoke for a moment. The neon reflection from the street painted faint blue lines across the floor. Finally, he glanced toward the display case. "You trust people more than I do," he said. Harper looked at the binder behind the glass. Then at the clean apron hanging neatly beside her locker. Then back at him. "No," she answered softly. "I just stopped being afraid that nobody would listen." Damien said nothing after that. He simply nodded once. And in the warm light of the empty restaurant where a woman once stood accused because she was easy to blame, the silence felt different now. Not like power. Not like fear. Like the moment after the truth has finally been heard.